What if you could authenticate to Azure Files without ever touching a domain controller? No VPN, no line of sight, and still use full Kerberos. Sounds impossible, right? Well, not anymore. Today, I'm going to show you how to turn Azure Files into a fully Entra ID powered, Kerberos enabled file system that works across hybrid and cloud-only devices. Let's make secure file access stupid easy. Hey everyone, Jeremy Wallace here, Microsoft MVP, certified trainer, and Azure Solutions Architect expert. Today we're diving into one of the most powerful, yet misunderstood, capabilities in the Microsoft Cloud ecosystem, Azure Files with Entra ID Kerberos Authentication. But first, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can be kept up to date on all our great Microsoft Cloud videos. So why does Azure Files with Entra ID Kerberos Authentication matter? Because this unlocks true single sign-on to Azure Files, Kerberos Authentication without Active Directory line of sight, hybrid and Entra ID join endpoint support, simplified migrations from traditional file servers, tight integration with private endpoints and secure access. Whether you're modernizing file servers, building new AVD environments, or eliminating legacy SMB infrastructure, this approach gives you the performance of Azure Files with the identity control of Entra ID. And in this video, I'm not just explaining it, I'm walking you through the full configuration, end to end, exactly as you'll do it in production. So let's jump right in. We'll start in the Azure portal, create the storage account, configure Azure Files with premium performance, set up the private endpoint, and then enable Entra ID Kerberos on the file share. From there, we'll move into DNS, enterprise app configuration, permissions, hybrid join device setup, and finally, test access on both hybrid and Entra ID join Windows machines. Now, what I'm about to walk you through is a setup for hybrid identities where Active Directory is still in play. However, doing this for cloud-only identities is now in preview, at least at the time of this recording. That means now you can introduce Azure Files with Entra Kerberos Authentication without Active Directory ever being involved. If that's your use case, just simply ignore any of the Active Directory related steps and follow everything else. Let's begin. I'm in the Azure portal. From the search bar, go ahead and search for storage accounts, go to storage accounts, and then select create. We're going to create a new resource group for this. I'm going to call it RGSA Entra Azure File, West US 01. I'm going to copy that section there. I'm going to paste it in here and remove the dashes. All right, so we have SA, Entra Azure Files, WS01. So you got to play with, it needs to be a unique name across all Azure tenants. And you can't use dashes or anything. We're going to go local redundancy for redundancy performance. We'll go premium. And account type, we're going to do file shares. Preferred storage type, Azure Files. So let me hit it from the top. Create a resource group. We named the storage account. I picked my Azure region. Preferred storage account type is Azure Files. Performance, I'm selecting premium. And then file share billing, I'm going to go with provision 1 because I only care about capacity here. I'm not going to customize the IOPS or throughput. If you do need to do that, you can use provision V2. All right, everything else I'm going to leave on the default here. Network, I'm going to disable the public network access. I want this to only be accessible from my Azure network. I'm going to add a private endpoint to put a NIC directly in the Azure VNet. Resource group here, RJ, EP, Entra Azure Files. The virtual network, let's go with the name PE for private endpoint. Entra Azure. Let's just do the name of the account, SA Azure WS01. Storage sub-resource file. That's the only option there. I'm going to select the virtual net and the subnet that I wanted in. Integrate with private DNS zone. I'm going to go ahead and leave it on to create the private DNS zone and hit OK. I have a different video that talks about private endpoints if you want to check that out. Then I'm going to hit next. And this brings me to data protection. I'm going to go with the defaults, 7 days there. Define encryption. I'm going to leave that. Microsoft Managed Keys, blob and files only. Important to add your tags. I'm not going to do it for the purpose of this video. And then review and create. It's going to validate. And pass validation. Let's go ahead and create. Let's wait for that to deploy. All right, this is finished deploying. So let's go ahead and go to the resource. So we now have our storage account. And I want to go down to data storage and file shares. And up at the top here, we see identity-based access under file share settings. I want to hit that not configured link. That's going to take me to the 3 options here under step 1, enable an identity source. For this, I'm going to choose Microsoft Entra ID Kerberos. I'm going to hit setup. So I'm going to check Microsoft Entra ID Kerberos in the panel that popped out here on the side. And then under domain services, it says to configure directory and file level permissions through Windows File Explorer, you'll also need to specify a domain name and domain GUID for your on-premises AD. You can get this information from your domain admin or from an on-premise AD joint client. So we need to put in the domain name. In this particular case, it's ad.safarimicrolab1.com. And the domain GUID, I'm going to have to grab from the domain controller. If we head over to our Active Directory domain controller and let's run PowerShell, should be able to use the commandlet get-ad domain. We're going to look for object GUID right here. We're going to copy that and head back over to the Azure portal, paste in that GUID. So on that Microsoft Entra ID Kerberos blade, we put in the domain name, ad.safarimicrolab1.com. We retrieve the domain GUID from the domain controller using that PowerShell commandlet, and now we've pasted that into here, and we're going to hit save. While I'm in here, I'm going to enable a default share permission. So I'm going to enable everyone at least be a reader, and then we can also assign them, for those that we need higher roles, we can specifically assign them the higher role. Now I'm going to go back to the file share page. This is back on the storage account under data storage file shares. And I'm going to add a file share specifically here. I'm just going to call this share 1 protocol. I'm going to go with SMB. We're not going to enable backup right now. And we're going to hit create. All right. And then we see share 1 is now there. I'm going to go to the access and control on the storage account, and I'm going to go to add role assignments. I'm going to search for SMB, and I want to put the storage file share SMB share elevated contributor. I hit next, and then I'm going to add those that I want to have the contributor role. So that's the count them on myself. Perfect. I'm going to hit next. I've selected storage file data SMB share elevated contributor on members. I added the members that I want to have this role, and then review and assign. I'm going to hit that review and assign button, and it's now going to add those roles. Next thing I need to do is we do have a private endpoint on this. So now I need to configure DNS on my domain controller so that I can reach the private endpoint. Under the storage account security plus networking, if I hit the networking tab, select private endpoints. I see the private endpoint that is there. I'm going to select that private endpoint. Expand settings on the left-hand side and go to properties. And then that gives me what the IP address is. And also I can see that. So it's going to use 10.10.08. Let's grab this fully qualified domain name from the DNS configuration. And actually, if I do a quick lookup of that IP address of that name, if I do NS lookup and then I paste in that fully qualified domain name. So in this case, it's SA enter Azure Files, wso1.file.core.windows.net. We can see that one of the aliases on it is this private link file.core.windows.net, and that's the zone that we need to create inside our Active Directory. So I'm actually going to grab that private link. I guess. Copy. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to copy that private link, head over to my domain controller. I'm going to open up DNS. So Server Manager, Tools, DNS. In the DNS Manager, I'm going to expand the domain controller and forward lookup zone. Right click for a lookup zone and hit New Zone. I'm going to create this primary zone. Next, to all DNS servers running in the domain, and then the zone name, I'm going to paste in that private link.file.core.windows.net. And I'm going to allow only secure dynamic updates. Hit finish. And now we see that private link.file.core.windows.net. And in here, I'm going to right click and do new host. And I want to put that storage account name. Copy that. I'm going to paste that in as the name. And then I'm going to grab the IP address from the Azure portal, which is 10.10.0.8. I'm going to paste that in as the IP address, 10.10.0.8. I'm going to hit add host. So now we have a host record in private link.file.core.windows.net. And if I do an NS lookup of it, of that full storage account name from the domain controller that's using its own DNS, might be easier to grab it from here. Now we can see that this is an alias of this private link address. And so that resolves against 10.10.0.8. I have a different video that deep dives into why this is, so I recommend that you watch that if you want to know why. All right, so now that the private endpoint's resolvable, we can get to that endpoint. Now let's head back to the Azure portal. And actually, we're going to switch over to the Entra portal. So let's head over to entra.microsoft.com. Now we're in the Entra Admin Center, and then we're going to head down to app registrations and switch over to all applications. Now, in here, we see an Entra app registration for the storage account. So we want to go into that storage account. See, it's a storage account and then the name of my storage account here. I'm going to select that. And we want to go down to API permissions. And we're going to do grant admin consent. You can see that's granted for all of those. And because we're using private endpoint or private link to get to these Azure files, we're going to want to go to manifest. And we need to modify the identifier URIs to include the private link addresses. So I'm going to download this to save a copy of how it currently is. I'm going to copy this here, copy what's in the identifier URIs, put a comma after the last piece, and then paste a copy. And the reason I'm pasting a copy is that I'm going to then reuse these fields and change them for the private link. So I want to change it so that it reads private link. So it should be an exact copy of what the identifier URIs were in there, except now you're modifying the URLs to be the private link address. Instead of just file.core.windows.net, it's now private link.file.core.windows.net. And so you can see that's the same thing that you see in here for the URL, so that we're putting the fully qualified domain name of the private link address in there so that proper authentication can occur. All right, I'm going to hit save. Just double check I have private link. That looks good. I'm going to hit the save button here. That was successful. All right, so next we want to enable client computers to grab the Cloud Kerberos ticket so they can authenticate and access the Azure files, that is, of course, using Azure Kerberos. To do that, it's going to depend on the way your client computers are set up. If they're hybrid joined, they're joined to Active Directory and Entra ID, then you can probably use your group policy, although you can also use Intune if you have those Intune managed hybrid devices. For Entra ID, You're not going to have group policy available for that since they're not Active Directory joined. So you're going to want to use Intune if you have Intune management. I highly recommend if you have Entra ID joined, only joined devices, then you should be using Intune management. But if you're using some other type of management solution, there is also a registry key that you can push out to those devices to enable it to grab that Cloud Kerberos ticket during the logon. I'm on my domain controller. I'm going to create the group policy for my hybrid joined devices. Group policy management. Prerequisite for this is you really want your devices to be hybrid joined. So they need to be in an OU that is synced to Entra ID. You can accomplish that in the Entra Connect sync client. I have my hybrid joined devices inside a computer's OU under this SLL1 OU. That's being synced to Entra ID. And I'm going to create a GPO in this domain and link it here. And let's just call this Azure Files, Cloud Kerberos, or Entra Kerberos. And then I'm going to edit that policy. And we're going to go to Computer Configuration Policies, Administrative Templates, and System. Let me expand this so we can actually see what's going on in here. And then Kerberos. And then we want to do allow retrieving the Cloud Kerberos ticket during the logon. So I'm going to set that to enabled. And then, of course, now we need to apply that to our client computers. So you're going to want to enforce a GPO update on your client computers, and then you should be able to authenticate to it. So next we'll hop over to the client computer. All right, so now I'm on a hybrid join computer. This is a Windows server, but this is true of Windows 11 as well. First, I want to make sure that this is a hybrid join computer, so we can run dsreg cmd/status. This will let us know if it's hybrid join. If we scroll to the top of this output here, we can see device state, Azure AD joined is yes, as well as domain joined. All right. So here I've pushed out the group policy. I ran a GP update of this, logged out, logged back in. That's always important when you're applying policies. With everything set up with the private endpoint, everything from the enterprise app, the app registration side of things, all of that with the private DNS record setting, we should be able to access this Entra Kerberos joined Azure Files. Let's grab the SMB address, head over to the storage account, file shares, go into the share. I'm going to hit connect. And I'm just going to hit show script here. That's the easiest way just to grab this. We can get the share path here. Copy. Now I should be able to paste the share path in and hit it. And yes, I am in. I can create the folders and what I make. Let's see if we can see it in here. If this is excluded. Nope, I don't have access to be able to see it from here. That's fine. Don't need to open that up right now. Next, set the proper permissions and lock this out so that it can be used like a proper share. All right, so when it comes to the share permissions, by default, you want to remove the authenticated users, which automatically gets put into the NTFS permissions by default there. So I would remove that, and that should also remove from inherited, correct. If you're going to use one share for multiple purposes, and you're going to give permissions to each individual top level folder inside the share, you can. Again, you would manage them very similar to a normal file share. So you can set the permissioning to go by Active Directory group, for instance. So if I wanted to do like HR as a group, I can give HR full control of this particular folder. Now let's just call this HR. All right. It has full control. So if I were to create text document in here. We can see that HR has full control there, but doesn't have access to the other folder that's here. You can manage it that way. My recommendation is to use Azure File Shares where each share is your top level folder. So don't think of, if you're coming from a traditional Windows file server share and you have one particular location where all of your shared folders are, you would have your HR folder and your IT information technology folder, and you have the department split out there. Instead of putting all of that structure into one Azure file share, my recommendation is from the Azure portal to split out your shares. I would recommend that you have one share for human resources. You do have some character limit constraints. Human resources, I'm not going to enable backup on this right now. Build out your top level folders here for each of the shares that are going to different departments. Have those as separate shares here inside the storage account, and then go into those particular accounts. If we go to human resources, set it here. Now you can go into security and get rid of authenticated users, get rid of the default users group, leave system, creator owner. Now this can be the HR share, and they can do whatever their subfolders are for the particular department and all of their inherited permissions. That would just be my recommendation for when you're using Azure Files, is don't dump all of what was your traditional Windows Server file share into one Azure Files share. Put all of your top level folders from that share, what your department shares would have been, any mounted path for a particular user. All of human resources had one mounted folder for them. That should go into your Azure portal, into the storage account, and create individual file shares here, all under the storage account. So same storage account, different shares built out. So this is all of your top level folder shares from your file share if you're migrating that architecture over. Now, default, it's going to provision a 1 terabyte provision storage share. So here you want to change your sizing and performance to what makes sense for your organization. I think 100 gigabytes is the smallest. So you're going to pay for the provision size of the share. If your share isn't a terabyte, bring that down to 100 gigabytes and then grow it dynamically that way. There's ways you can script kind of an auto scale capability for your Azure Files. We're not going to cover that here on this video. Do pay attention to your provision sizes for your shares, and then follow that recommendation is have a separate file share from one in the storage account for each of those departments. Don't dump it all into just one share. Performance-wise, it's better if it's broken out. Permissioning-wise, migration-wise, if you use the Azure File Sync, just syncing in that one directory's files into that one share is going to be a lot easier to allow you to do a phased migration approach into the Azure File Shares rather than dumping everything there. It's similar to the same advice I give for SharePoint sites. If you're migrating from an on-premise file share into SharePoint, don't stick all of your share into one document library, build out separate document libraries. So that's my same kind of advice here. Separate Azure File Shares, similar to separate document libraries for your files. But there you go. You have a Entra ID joined Azure File Share running on hybrid. I'm going to hop over to Entra ID, to an Entra ID joined. I'm going to hop over to an Entra joined Windows 11 machine to show you how it works there, so that you're not only seeing it from a hybrid joined machine. So if we do the same thing from a Windows 11 Entra ID joined machine, I'm going to sign in here. If I open up and search for ds-reg cmd/status. We take a look at the device status. We see that this is Azure AD joined, domain joined now. So this is only Entra ID joined. So what happens if we try to access this? If I copy and paste the share path, I get prompted for username and password, and the system cannot contact a domain controller to service the authentication request. So even if I do my credentials in here, so what's happening here is I have not prepared my endpoint to access the cloud Kerberos ticket. Just like I showed you with the hybrid joined machines, I had to use the GPO for that. The GPO can't apply to my Entra joined machine. So either I need to push it out via Intune, which I won't cover in this video, or you need to push out a registry setting, or just make that registry setting yourself. In command prompt, you paste in this commandlet, reg add, and then hklm/system/current control set/control/lsa/Kerberos/parameters /v cloud Kerberos ticket retrieval enabled /t reg_dword/d1. So it's creating a reg dword key inside this registry location, set to 1. Hit enter. Oh, need to run it as administrator. Let me run as admin. Or I can just run it from the PowerShell here. I'm going to paste in that same reg add. Hit enter. I'm just going to run it. Search for CMD, run as administrator. Yes. I'll paste in that same reg add key here. Notice running as administrator this time. Hit enter. Operation completed successfully. Now, this enables the retrieval upon login. I do need to sign out and sign back in. Signing back in. All right, back on my desktop. Here's the share path. Enter. And there we go. I'm in the share. So still Entra joined computer. I don't have access to a domain controller to get the Kerberos ticket. It's getting it from Entra ID. So it's getting the cloud Kerberos ticket for this so that I can access this file share. All right, so there you have it. A Entra Kerberos joined Azure Files being accessed from hybrid joined computers and Entra joined computers.